Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about my favorite books that I read in 2020. And I decided to do a top 10 list where my only rule is that I wanted to have one book per author because I read a lot of amazing books this year and I wanted to include as many different reads as possible. So that's why one book per author, which already was difficult to choose 10. So if I would have included multiple books for one author, it was nearly impossible to only pick 10. So without further ado, let's just jump into number 10, and that one is The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. This is the first book in an epic fantasy series called The Winnowing Flame. It's supposed to be a trilogy and it's already completed, but I've only read the first book up until now. So in this first book, a lot happens, and it's a little bit difficult to explain, but I'll do my best. So we jump into a world that has been at war with a species called the Worm People for 8 times in the past. And each of these wars are called reigns, so that's why the title of the book. There have been 8 reigns in the past, and we are now waiting and seeing if a 9th reign will occur. Now, for these 8 times, this world has been able to defeat the Worm People with the help of the Iborians. Iborians are a species here that live alongside humans, and they are a little bit like elves. They are bigger than humans, they are very pretty, and they live a lot longer than normal human life. So they have been able to defeat these worm people with the help of their tree god. And how they have been able to defeat them, that's something that you really need to find out for yourself when you read the book. Another thing where their tree god is very important is that it has fluids that the Iborians drink, and this is something that also gives them this longer life. Now, after the 8th reign, the tree god died, and this is why a lot of people are afraid that when a 9th reign would occur, they will not be able to defeat the worm people without the help of this tree god. Now, when the story starts, you follow 3 people in this world. You follow Noon, who is a fell witch, which means that she can subtract life from all living things, so grass for example, and she can make fire out of it. When we meet her, she is being held captive in a sort of industry-like setting where they use her power to make some kind of drug. Then we follow Vintage. She is a scholar, and Elliot Brooks described her as some sort of Indiana Jones, if Indiana Jones would have been black, 50 years old, and a woman, and that's definitely true. So she is a scholar and a scientist who wants to learn more about these reigns that have been in this land in the past, as well as who these worm people are exactly, because a lot of this is still unknown. But she really wants to have this in-field experience, so she is roaming around the land trying to find artifacts that these worm people have left behind and investigating them. And then the third character that we follow is Tormelin. He is an Iborian, but when his tree god died and the fellow Iborians kind of lost a lot of their powers, as I said, they really needed that fluid of the tree god, and now they don't have that anymore, so their society is really crumbling down. And when that happened, he left the city of Ibora to see a little bit more of the world. So that's all I'm going to say about this book. As you can probably hear by now, it's really a lot is happening and is going on, and it almost seems a little bit too much in one book, but Jen Williams really does an amazing job in putting it all together in a really understandable way. And much of the strength in this book are the characters. I loved all of them. You also meet some side characters along the way that are very interesting. And I also really liked getting to know the world, because in the beginning you have tons of questions. What is this tree god? Who are the worm people? Why are the wars called reigns, etc.? So you really get to know a lot in this first book, and I think that this will expand more towards the second and the third in the trilogy, and I'm really excited to get to know a little bit more about this. At number 9 we have Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is one of her standalone fairy tale retellings, and by far the best one in my opinion, which is based on the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin. This was my favorite fairy tale as a child, so that might have something to do with it, but she really expands the fairy tale a lot further and does a very good job at it. This is an historical fantasy set in medieval Russia, where you follow Miriam. Miriam is the daughter of a moneylender, and as far as moneylenders go, he's probably one of the worst, because whenever he needs to get money back from people, he grows very sorry for them, and he basically let them take advantage of him. And the result is that his family is very poor while everybody else is doing perfectly fine. Now, one day Miriam has enough of it and she starts doing his rounds, and she's very ruthless because she remembers how the people treated her father. Now, as a result, and because they had a lot of money from previous years that they needed to extract back, she grows rich very fast. And this kind of spins the tale that she can, or the rumor, that she can turn silver into gold. Now, one day, the Stark King, which is sort of a fairy tale king that lives in a parallel world where it's always winter, finds out about this rumor and he contacts her, letting her know that she needs to turn his silver into gold 3 times. If she succeeds, she will have to marry him, and if she fails, he will turn her into ice. So she really can't win this one. There are a lot of sideline stories as well that are very interesting, but this is the main plot. As you can hear, it's a very wintry read, so if you're looking for something to read in the upcoming months, this is definitely one that I would recommend to anyone. I really loved Miriam as a character. You start by following her the whole time, but after a while you have some secondary characters that are also very interesting. Something that Naomi Novik does very well is write very distinct characters. So when you start reading a new POV, you immediately recognize who you're following. And that's something that I really like, if you can do that without becoming stereotypical in your descriptions. The next book that I have on this list is part of a series that is very well loved, and I think that a lot of people will be surprised that it's this low on the list, but still, of course, it's in my top 10, so I loved it a lot. And that is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which is his third book in the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. I think that most people know what this series is about, so I won't go too deep into the premise of this book. Here you follow Vin, who is a member of the suppressed class, and she, together with a group of friends, tries to overrule the Lord Ruler, who has been in power for decades and is responsible for the suppression of the Ska population. The thing that I loved most about this series was the heart magic system. This is one of the most well-known heart magic systems that are out there, with a very clear, strict set of rules and limitations of the magic system. People in this world that can use magic do so by ingesting different kinds of metals and then burning them, giving them certain sets of powers. So example, if you were able to ingest one kind of metal, this can give you the ability to see and hear better. Another type of metal can give you the ability to push on metals, which can basically make you fly a little bit. Now, most people in this world have the ability to use one kind of metal, but you have certain people called Mistborns who can ingest all metals and use all of them. So that's something very interesting, because I don't really have a strong preference for a hard or a soft magic system, but when a hard magic system is done well, that can definitely give something interesting to the book. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the storyline. Brandon Sanderson can really put in some plot twists that I enjoy, and the ending of this one, so the third book and the final book of the trilogy, is the best ending that I've ever read, which is why it's on this list. The number 7 spot of this list is taken up by The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. This is the second book in her Winter Night trilogy, and as the title probably tells you, this is a story that's perfect if you're looking for a very atmospheric winter read. So perfect for this time of the year, at least if you're somewhere where it's cold at the moment. So in the first book you meet Vasha. Vasha lives in medieval Russia in a very small village, in the time where Christianity is making an uprise. And as a result, people are neglecting their household spirits and all of the older rituals that they did, because Christianity is really taking the forefront at this time. Now Vasha can see these household spirits, and she sees how they weaken while evil forces as a result grow stronger. So in the first book she tries to help the household spirits in order to save her village. In the second book she tries to save her country, and then in the third book she tries to save the world. This is a very atmospheric read, so that's why I say that it's not for everyone. The plot, especially in the first book, isn't that important up until the end maybe, when the end might feel a little bit rushed. In the second and the third book, definitely a lot more things happen. There are a lot of folklore influences. I think that Vasha herself is a very prominent folklore figure in Russian folklore. In the second book you meet the Firebird, you have the Winter King that is present in all 3 books of this trilogy, and you also have mention of Baba Yaga. So I chose the second book because here the story really opens up, and I really enjoyed it. I love atmospheric reads, so this was one of my favorites for sure. Now the next book that is on the list is actually one that I just finished. So that is 12 Kings by Bradley P. Bolio. This is the first book in an epic fantasy series that will be 6 books in total of the main series, and then you also have a bunch of novellas. At the moment 5 books are out, but the 6th book is coming out next year, so if you're looking for a series to binge read, then I think this one would be perfect for it. This book, or this series, takes place in Sharakai, which is a desert city that is being led by 12 kings. These 12 kings have been in power for over 400 years, and they have been given that power by the desert gods. All of these kings have a specific set of skills. You, for example, have the Whisper King, who has been known to hear when people are plotting against him, for example. And they are being protected by the Blade Maidens, so sort of assassins that are very skilled with the blade. They basically keep in power because those skills, but also because a lot of people are afraid of them. And in this book we follow Shada, who is a pit fighter of 19 years old. And her mother was murdered by the kings when she was 8 years old because she discovered some of their secrets. Now Ada has sworn to avenge her mother, and she is trying to discover the secrets that her mother knew in order to kill the kings. This is an amazing story. I really like the setting. The desert setting was perfect for this. I loved Shada as a character, and I really like the mystery. Now, because the kings have been in power for 400 years and they have been given their power by desert gods, you know a lot of the lore in this story, or at least you get to know that when you read the book, because Shada is also trying to figure out what of the history is true and what part of the history is being lied to them by the kings. And I can't wait to start the second book in this series. The next book on this list is going to be Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan, which is the first book in his Raven's Shadow trilogy. In this book you follow Valen while he tells his life story as a young boy up until the point that he's telling the story when he is being captured by an enemy empire. So as a boy he is left by his father at the gates of the Sixth Order. This is a caste where they train young boys into warriors of the Fate. So it's definitely a school-like setting if you enjoy this, but it's grimdark. Don't be surprised when you find that out. So this is a very brutal learning school. Children actually die while they are trained, and in the end they are really warriors at their finest. So the magic system here is a little bit at the background in the beginning. You don't get to see a lot of the magic up until the end. This is definitely a coming of age story. I really enjoyed it. I have heard that the second and the third book in this trilogy are not as good, but you can read this as a standalone if you want to. So the next book on the list is Baptism of Fire by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the third book in the main Witcher series. So I really enjoyed the series of The Witcher as a whole. I do think that the ending was a little bit weaker than everything else, but I still enjoyed it. But Baptism of Fire is definitely the best one. In the Witcher series you follow Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher, and his quest to find Ciri, which is a child that he has a connection with. Ciri is the princess of a country, but she is currently on the run after her country was invaded by an enemy empire. Now, don't be mistaken that this series is about Geralt and his adventures. This is really a story about Ciri, and then you do follow Geralt as well while he's trying to find Ciri. This is a very interesting series in my opinion. I haven't really read anything like it. I do think that the strongest part here are the characters. I love the interaction of Geralt with his friends while he's looking for Ciri. I love Ciri as a character as well. I think she's amazing. I like that everything that is in these books is with the background of the war that is going on, which you don't really see that often, because either the war is really the prominent scene that is set, or you don't really see a lot of it. But here you do, which I think is definitely a positive point. If you are looking more for the stories of Geralt and his adventures as a witcher, then I do think that the two short story books are perfect. So now we get into my top 3 of 2020. And the number 3 spot is for The Emperor's Blades by Brian Staveley, which is the first book in the Chronicle of the Unhoned Throne trilogy. This is an epic military fantasy that's definitely grimdark in nature, so be aware of that before you start. This story begins after the Emperor of Anur is assassinated, and this empire reminds me sort of a little bit of the Persian Empire, which is very interesting in my opinion. And you follow his 3 children after this happened. So first of all you have Adar. Adar is his eldest child. She is a woman and she is currently living in the capital studying to become a politician. And her main goal in the beginning of this book is to find the persons or the people that are responsible for the assassination of her father. Then you have Valen. Valen is the eldest son, but he doesn't have the special eyes that are required to be the heir of the throne. He is currently at the other side of the empire, training to become some sort of elite soldier, and when his training is completed, he will fly on these massive war birds and are kind of a special unit of the empire. Then we have Caden. He is the youngest child, but he is the eldest son with the special eyes, so he is the heir of the throne, and he is on the other side of the empire training to become a monk of the Blank God. He doesn't really understand why he needs this training to become the emperor, but this is something that you will discover together with him. So these 3 siblings have not seen each other in years. They are on different sides of the empire, they're miles away, they have no means of communicating with each other, and they're actually strangers of each other. So what you see here is basically that all of these siblings are trying to do the right thing after these tumultuous situations occur, but because there is a lot of distrust and because they are not fully trained for what they should do, they definitely make some wrong decisions, and their characterization can go some very dark ways in the second and the third book, which I know that a lot of people didn't really enjoy, but I personally loved it. There's definitely some mentions of some very epic gods, which I also really enjoy. So I mentioned that Caden, for example, is learning to become a priest for the Blank God, but you have different set of priesthoods who all worship a different god. So the mention of all of these different gods is something that I also really liked in this story, but the thing that I like most about this story is just how these 3 characters are actually not ready for what they need to do, but try to make the best out of it. I would definitely recommend this. I feel like this is a little bit of a hidden gem. On BookTube, I see it on some people's bookshelves, but in general, not a lot of people have actually read it. So I recommend this if you're looking for a grim dark that is set in a little bit of a different world with a lot of interaction with the gods as well. Now we're at my second favorite book of 2020, which is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in her Farseer trilogy, and the Farseer trilogy as a whole is her first trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings series, which is a very big epic fantasy series that consists of 16 books in total. In the Farseer trilogy, you follow Fitz, who is a royal bastard, and he tells his life story as an elder man, starting from when he's 6 years old, and the family of his mother, who are just peasants, leave him at the royal gates because they don't want to take care of him anymore. You have his grandfather, who is currently king, who wants to keep him very close because of course he has royal blood. So the king wants to make sure that he remains loyal, and he starts using his services and uses him to become an assassin. Now, I do think that these titles are very badly chosen, because when you have assassin in the title, you expect a very fast-paced epic story that is about the assassinations. And this isn't the case here. You follow Fitz. This is a very character-driven story. I think that a lot of people would say that definitely the first one is very slow, but also the second and the third one, it focuses on Fitz and what a hard life he has and how he needs to put himself second. You have 2 types of magic systems. One of it is one that Fitz has, where he can communicate and form a bond with animals. And this is something that is more prevalent in this book, so the second book of the series, which is why I enjoyed this one the most. And then my number one book that I read this year, basically the best book that I ever read, this one won by a mile, and that is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This is the first book in her Seven Waters trilogy, and the second and the third one were also amazing. It's the best trilogy that I've ever read, but this first one is something special. This is a fairy tale retelling of the Six Swans, and you follow Sorka. Sorka is the seventh child of the seventh son, who is the Lord of Seven Waters. So she has six older brothers, but she herself is a girl. And this story takes place when her father marries an evil sorceress who turns her brothers into swans in order to prevent them from interfering with her plans. Now Sorka, with the help of the Fae folk, can undo the spell, but to do so she needs to make 6 shirts, so one for each brother, out of thorns, and while doing so she has to remain silent the entire time. So this might seem strange to follow a main character that isn't talking, but because you're in her head the entire time, you really become connected to Sorka. This is such a whimsical read. Juliette Marillier can really weave folklore into these kinds of stories. Again, if you're looking for a very whimsical fairy tale retelling, very atmospheric read where nature plays a very important role in the magic system, then I would definitely suggest you pick this one up. So that was my top 10 books that I read in 2020. Have you read any of these? And if so, what did you think of them? Did you also love them? Or were there some that you didn't like at all, that you maybe were a little bit disappointed with? And please tell me why. If you have another favorite book of 2020, you can also let me know in the comments down below and I might check it out myself. Bye!